This is Heart-repreneur Radio, maximizing your personal and business results by leading with your heart. With your host, Terri Levine. Listen every week as Terri tackles the topics that will help you become a successful heart-centered entrepreneur. Be sure to read the blog posts at www.heartrepreneur.com/blog. Come back often and add this show to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes. You can also follow Terri on Twitter at MentorTerri and on Facebook.com/Heart-repreneur Terri Levine. And now here's Terri.
Hello and welcome to Heart-repreneur Radio and TV with Terri Levine. I'm your co-host, Velma Gallant, and I'm excited to be here today. You can connect with Terri, me, and other like-minded heart-based business owners at the Heart-repreneurs with Terri Levine Facebook group. So go check it out. There's lots of great, juicy information there. So today's quote, a quote coach is someone who tells you what you don't want to hear, who has you see what you don't want to see, so you can be who you've always known you could be. Tom Landry. And today's show topic is why the business coaching industry is broken. Our special guest today is Scott Ritzheimer. Scott has helped nearly 20,000 new businesses and nonprofits, and with his business partner started and led their multi-million-dollar business through an exceptional and extended growth phase. Over 10 years of double-digit growth, all before he turned 35. He founded Scale Architects to help businesses across the country identify the right growth strategies and find the right guides to get them on the fast track to predictable success and stay there as long as possible. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So, as a person who has coaches, who has coached, I was a little bit surprised by the topic you chose to play with, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about it. Why would you say the business coaching industry is broken?
Yeah, great question. Well, first off, like you mentioned before the show, and like I think many of our listeners, I love coaching. There is something just spectacular about that person who's willing to say, "Hey, I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out, and I know someone else out there who does." The person who's willing to say, "I can go further, faster if I'm willing to bring someone else into the fold. If I'm willing to be humble enough to say, hey, will you help?" And there's those lightning in a bottle moments. You know it. You know, you've been in those coaching sessions. You've even provided those coaching sessions that are just transformational. Like you can see it happen. I love those times when you're sitting in a room and someone starts kind of crouched down. They're all bummed and whatever. And they end up like sitting at the edge of their chair, eyes open, ready to go. I love it. Like I live for those moments. I really do. The problem is you would think that those moments are happening all the time. There's thousands of coaches. I think this year it was over a $10 billion industry, business coaching. And, you go to a room full of entrepreneurs or leaders and you ask how many of them have had a coach, and just about everyone's going to raise their hand. But if you go to that same group and you say, how many of you has had a bad coaching experience? 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100 can look back and say, I had this experience. And for many who are no longer being coached, that's precisely the reason why they're not being coached. And I run into a lot of entrepreneurs in my work. I run into a lot of coaches in my work. And it surprises me how many of them think coaching doesn't work. And the reason for that is they have a perfectly valid reason, and that at some point in the past, it didn't work. And we have to ask ourselves the question, why is that? Why is it that so many people have had a bad coaching experience? And the reason for that is they've hired the wrong coach. Now, we get this, especially when it comes to employees, right? If you were to go out, hire an employee and they're just the wrong person for the job, they come in, maybe they do their best, but they just don't do a good job. Sure, it's down to that employee, but ultimately as a business owner, that's on your shoulders, right? You have to learn, if you want to succeed in business, you have to learn how to hire well, how to hire the right people. And we get that, and we can learn how to do that. There's so many resources out there on how to hire great employees, how to find the right ones. There's all kinds of services to help you do that. But what about hiring the right coach, right? No one out there is talking about how do you find the right coach. there's plenty of resources out there on how to be a great coach. There's plenty of resources out there that say you need a coach, but how many do you know of that will teach you how to find the right coach at the right time? And what ends up happening is we get the wrong coach, or we get the wrong coach at the wrong time. And it's not necessarily the coach's fault. A lot of times we'll put on, like, I had a bad experience. It was that coach. They did something, they sold me a bag of goods, whatever it may be. We like to push it on the coach. But at the end of the day, we have to take responsibility for that as clients, and particularly with coaching relationships. And so when you take those and you mix them together, you've got a bunch of coaches who, especially in your world and Terri's world, she's doing a wonderful job of this, but a lot of coaches really, really struggle, especially in the beginning, to make enough to just get by. They're trying to eat. And so they get on a call with a prospect. They've been trying to get on a call with a prospect all day. They finally get on one, and that person says, "Hey, can you help me with fill in the blank, whatever it is?" They're going to say yes, probably because they've had some experience with that in the past. Most people who get into coaching do it because they've been great leaders and they want to share that with other people. They want to pour that back into the world that they gained from, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a great solution for whatever problem folks are coming into. And so you have this mix where they're trying to put food on the table, right? They're trying to make a living. It's not even like they're trying to get rich. They're just trying to get by. They're trying to get this new organization off the ground. They're trying to breathe life into this dream of being a coach as a career. And uh, we ask them, "Hey, can you do this?" And they say yes. And again, it's just like an employee. You ask an employee who really wants a job, right? You have this job, they think it's a dream job, but you say, "Hey, can you do this? Can you fill X, Y, Z?" They're going to smile from ear to ear and say yes. And they're going to have every good intention of doing it. They may even think that they can do it, but just because someone says they can help doesn't mean that they can. And again, in the world of hiring, we've had those bad experiences and we learn from them. But I've found so often in the world of coaching, we don't learn from this experience. We just throw it out. And for that reason, I think we've got to be able to teach people how to find the right coach so that we can get coaches paired up with the right people so that those lightning in a bottle moments can happen. And that's when we'll move further and faster. But that's not happening right now. We're leaving way too much to chance and we're blaming it on each other in the process. And that's why I think so much of the coaching world today is broken.
I would agree with you on pretty much all of that. And I think what I'm hearing is that there's a bit of responsibility on both sides that needs to come in here. One is making sure you're going to interview a few candidates for a job. Why not interview a few candidates for that role in your business as well? It makes sense. And it also makes sense that, I mean, it's something that Terry teaches is stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Stay in your lane with the business that you have, because I think too, I'm going to feel like crap. It's not the word that I had in my head, but I'm going to feel like crap if I say yes to somebody and I'm not able to create the impact that I would have been able to create had we been hiring under the right circumstances. So I know
Absolutely.
I have a pretty strict filtering process as well. And the main reason is if I'm going to do this work, I want, I'm going to be blunt, I want that testimonial on the other side. I want that person to succeed, because if they succeed, then I'm going to succeed at my business. I'm not going to succeed if I'm taking on people on a maybe. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're hitting so many great points, but that in a box, you put all that together, and that's why if you look at it, 8 out of 10 new coaches fail, right? So we have the entrepreneur side of it, we have the leader side of it, who's saying like, "Hey, coaching doesn't work," which is massively isolating, right? When you bump into a problem, you go and ask for help. Someone says yes, and then they don't help you. That's a scary, scary place to be, because you start to believe if I can't figure it out, then no one can. And when you talk about feeling lonely at the top, not only do you feel lonely at the top, you just feel lonely because you can't even go outside of your organization for help. But then on the coach side, it's just bad. Like how many coaches do you talk to that have imposter syndrome? I mean, it's all over the place, right? And I had an opportunity this year of interviewing close to 100 different coaches and consultants, and there were three issues that popped up all the time. But going through the progression that you walk through, if we don't do that, if we don't find the right clients, say yes to the right things, we end up getting ourselves in places where we're making it up as we go, and that's a tough place to live. And the big thing about it is like none of this is a problem that really has to exist. You know, the answers are actually surprisingly simple. And if both sides of the equation can recognize, hey, here are the two or three things that I need to adjust, then all of a sudden our hit rate on those successes as an industry just goes through the roof. And that's great for everybody.
Well, it is too. One of the things that I've noticed with a lot of the younger people that I encounter in my life is their idea of collaboration. It is so inspiring to see these young people collaborating the way that they do. And I see in our industry, there's both end of the spectrum. There are the ones that are I can't collaborate with people because they're my competition. And then there's the others that step up and say, I want to collaborate with people. Because if I have those kinds of relationships, when I bump into somebody who's wanting to hire me and I know I'm not the right match, I can still be a contribution to that person by supporting them to connect to the right person
Right.
that can support them with where they're going. And when I have that kind of relationship with other coaches and consultants, there is that exchange. So again, it's still the same thing. It's collaborating with the potential clients, collaborating with other coaches to make sure that we are all rising together and we're all succeeding together.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree.
So tell me a little bit about how is it? Because I want to access a little bit about you because I think there's some really juicy stuff in there because I suspect that that is part of where your view came in regarding the business coaching industry is that you bumped into that yourself. How did you end up finding the right guides for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. It took a really long time, and part of that was just the culture of the business that I worked for. So, business that I started. I guess we technically restarted it when I was 22 years old. Had been a multi-million-dollar business, had been basically destroyed in a bad sale agreement. Got it back. It's like, hey, we believe in this thing. We can make it work. Let's do it. And we ran and a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to this. You succeed by doing a lot of things that people tell you you can't do. Right. We built a business in an industry that did not exist. We helped churches across the country and had a thriving business doing it. You know, most people say you get into the world of church planting and you better go raise support somewhere because otherwise you're not going to make any money. And we charged very little, but did a phenomenal job, and we're able to make a great business out of it. And so we've got this track record building up of successes where we've kind of gone against what people have told us to do. Right? We're charging less than what they say. We're giving more generous terms. We're niching down into this group that folks say, hey, that's not really going to work. And a lot of entrepreneurs, by definition, entrepreneurs have beat the odds, right? If you have a successful entrepreneur, they've beat the odds. And so they've already done something that in a sense almost isn't possible. What happens though is we start to think that we can do all of the things against the odds, right? And so you start having the track record. Hey, we know how to do this. We've got this thing figured out. Like we know what's going. And then all of a sudden you start bumping into problems that you can't fix, right? You start dealing with people issues that you weren't expecting. You start dealing with the rules of the game start to change as the organization grows. And I remember I went out looking for coaches, and I told there were two things I was looking for. Is one, I feel like we're a big fish in a small pond, and that to me is not a safe place to be because you can't grow that way, right? And two, I need someone who can look around the corner and tell me what's coming. There's so many people out there who can help solve the current problem. But what I found is and a lot of people make this mistake. You go out and hire someone to solve a specific problem. And this sounds like it goes against your stay in your lane thing. And I'm going to tie them together because they are 100% both necessary. But you have to make sure you're solving the right problem first. Right. And so I made this mistake as a business owner, and I see a lot of people make this mistake now, particularly with the work that I do. And as we go out, we kind of look for a silver bullet. We wait too long and we're in crisis mode, and we go out to try and find someone to rescue us. But you can't be rescued. That's not a coach's job, right? They can help you. They can help turn things around. But that place of like we're so desperate, we need something now. You start hoping for a silver bullet. You start hoping that if I can just change this one thing, if I can follow the 3 simple steps or whatever, it's going to revolutionize everything. That's not true. That's great marketing, but it's just not the case, unless you get to the root cause. And I know as a business owner, and I think many business owners, we're really bad at getting to the root cause. And the challenge with the way we set up most of our coaching relationships is that we go out and look for someone to solve an issue and get the help after we think we've figured out what the right issue was. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've found the right issue or that the person we chose is going to help us solve the right issue. Does that make sense? They're not getting to the root cause of what's going on.
It
So,
absolutely does. It sounds
yeah,
to me like taking care of the symptoms rather than the actual disease.
100%. Exactly. So what did this look like for us? We went out and we had this great operation doing events around the country. And we would go into a city, we would do an event, we'd meet a lot of church planners was our world. So we'd meet a lot of, it was a wonderful time. We'd do a lot of business through those events, but it was getting harder and harder because my partner was the one who had to do all the travel and all the teaching. He was amazing at it. The guy would, he could go up and give a full day presentation basically without breathing. I don't know how he did it. It was just amazing. And it would be, he would make tax law interesting to church planters. And it was just, it was phenomenal what he could do. Just absolutely gifted individual. But we got to about 50 conferences and we're like, we have no more weeks left for you to travel. Like, how are we going to grow? And so we hired a consultant to come in and look at, okay, hey, how do we grow our event business? And they said, you need to find another speaker to replace the CEO, and then you'll be able to scale it and it'll be wonderful. And so that's what we did. We went on a 9-month search for a new speaker. We spent about $40,000, and we were looking for a unicorn. The position really didn't exist. It wasn't possible to reproduce him in that way. Now, simultaneously, what's going on under the surface? The real problem that was happening was that events as a whole, as an industry for our space, were declining. And so we were going to get a diminished return on every new event that we did. And what we couldn't see, because we were just trying to bring our events up, get another speaker in and do more. And what our consultant couldn't see, because they didn't ever stop and ask, should we be doing this either, was that the whole thing was destined to fail before we even started. It was a position that we couldn't fill. It was a model that just wasn't going to work. And so when we actually found someone who can say, hey, here's what's going on, right? It actually had to do with a business stage that we're in that prevented us from seeing the market shift. And when we found that, we took a huge step back and said, should we even be doing these events in the first place? And when we did that, when we actually found someone who could make sense of the whole of our business, who could help us identify that root issue, that we were over dependent on our CEO, and that our sales system had to move to a more reproducible model for us to scale at the stage that we were at. Once they did that, we recognized all that. We pivoted away from events 100%. So we cut off over $1 million of revenue in 1 year, just cold turkey, done, and transferred all of our energy over to our inside sales channel to build it up. We not only replaced all of the income from our events, we added $800,000 to our bottom line.
Wow. That's amazing. There is so much juicy stuff in there that I really want to touch on, but I want to make sure that we pause for our commercial here. And when we come back, I want to make sure that our listeners have an opportunity to be able to connect with you. So I'll get you to share that when we come back.
Hey there, it's Terri Levine. I just wanted to pop in for just a moment as you're listening here to Heart-repreneur Radio and watching Heart-repreneur TV. We have so many new and exciting things going on. So you can watch a free masterclass. Highly recommend to get a conveyor belt of qualified prospects. That's at TL, like Terri Levine, tlwebinar.com. Head over there, enjoy it, keep listening and sharing the show.
Welcome back to Heart-repreneur Radio and TV. We are here today with our special guest, Scott Ritzheimer. And we've been talking about some really amazing stuff, talking about why the business coaching industry is broken and actually what we can do about it. That I think is the really important part of this conversation. So before we get started again, Scott, can you share with our listeners what the best way for them to connect to you would be?
Yeah, absolutely. If you head over to our website, scalearchitects.com, we've got lots of resources, both for companies and for coaches there. Particularly what I'd love to just offer to your audience is a free chapter of our book, Predictable Success. And so you can go to scalearchitects.com/free-chapter, scalearchitects.com/free-chapter. And the reason that I'm doing that is because it helps us to address the when question, which is the big part. I've mentioned several times hiring the right coach at the right time. And what I found is a majority of the time, there's lots of reasons why coaching relationships don't work, but a majority of the time when we find someone that we like and it still doesn't produce the results that we want, it's because we've addressed the wrong problems at the wrong time. And that first chapter of the book will introduce everyone to 7 different stages that an organization goes through. So whether you're a founder, whether you're in the nonprofit world, whether you're a CEO or a leader of a team, these 7 stages apply to any group of 2 or more. And by understanding where you are in one of those 7 stages, you'll be able to find what the core issues are for a business in that stage. And by doing that, it'll take you way closer to finding the right coach to address the core issues that everything else stems from.
Okay, I like that because that was one of the things that you said earlier was that the rules were changing as your organization grew. And it was interesting when you were talking about growth, and it was like, okay, we need to duplicate the CEO, and that was it's a logical next step, but is it really the next step? And so what I heard was is you eventually found a way to take a more holistic approach rather than just tackling the one problem of more.
Yeah. Yeah, and this same pattern can show up in all different places, but you hit it right on the head, and you mentioned this earlier. It's that we were trying to solve a symptom when what we really needed to do is treat a disease inside the organization. Now, trying to convince folks that their organization has a disease is a difficult endeavor. So, if you're a coach, I wouldn't go out and say, "Hey, you've got a disease." That's not a great sales technique. But but getting to those root causes, that's where the transformation happens. And folks who've had success like yours, like many of your listeners, it's those times where they either happened upon getting into the right place or where they were very intentional, like the process you talked about earlier of really defining who can I create that kind of transformation for, right? Who can I help address the root causes? And then once you have that nailed down, if you nail down the when question, right? When is that problem that I solved the most important? Because it can be all kinds of things. Like for us, our root cause was not sales. But for other organizations in other stages, their root cause is the lack of sales, right? And so it's not that it's one thing or another. It's not that one type of coaching is better than another. It's the timeliness of it all that makes so much of a difference. And when you can match your niche, your own skills to the stage that your clients are going through, where your skills are most transformative, that's the lightning. That's the magic of the whole thing.
Well, and I think that's where it's so important to be coming from that space of collaboration, because if you have the relationship with the coach, the organization that supports someone before they come to you, support someone after they're complete with you, then you're providing that holistic approach to your client. Somebody knows that when they come to you, you might not have the answers, but you will make sure that they get them. And so you're still going to be a go-to person no matter what. You're building a brand, you're building who you are out in the world, and you get to make a difference no matter whether you're actually in the mud with them
Yeah.
or whether you're just surveying the landscape.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very good. It's very good. And what I love again about this model that we've got put together on the different stages is that we give language to that, because it can be hard if you're, let's say you're in sales and you're an amazing sales trainer, and you go into an organization and they need that, like that's the right time, right moment. You go in, you teach a team how to sell. I mean, they can double, triple, quadruple the next year, right? I've seen it happen time and time again. But if you walk into an organization that's not in that right stage and you try and teach them how to sell when their bigger problems are happening downstream, right? They're battling the complexity of a growing supply chain or whatever their industry is, the actual fulfillment of it, and you give them the ability to quadruple sales, you're going to crush the organization. And so without a model for really recognizing, because folks in both scenario will come and say, hey, help us with our sales. So even on the coach's side, if you can say, hey, let me take a look at where your business is at and whether or not my services are the thing that you need right now, that's where that collaboration comes in. And what we've done with these 7 stages is given people language to talk about that, right? Given people language to say, hey, here's where my services really work. And when a client comes in and says, hey, you're in a later stage or you're in an earlier stage, these are some problems that you're going to want to address first to get the most out of my services. And so let me connect you with a person who operates in that stage. And it takes something that's very abstract, right? Business stages. What is that? And boils it down into something that we can actually talk about. We give language to each of those stages. And it's simple, it's not complex, and it just, again, it boosts that hit rate significantly.
I really like that because what I'm hearing is the dots that have been connecting for me are along the lines of, and it's been said a lot, in order to know how to get to point B, you need to know where you are and then you can map it out. But what I'm also hearing is having the map is not always enough, that you need to know which hotels you're going to stay in along the way. What are some of the toll booths that are there? That kind of thing. Like what I'm hearing is you guys have found a way to articulate not just the map, but some of the things that are along the full journey. So you're
Yeah.
knowing where you are in the journey and can hit the right spots from there.
Yeah. Yeah, if you got a map, you got to be able to read it too, right? Like you need to know, hey, we're crossing a river. Is there a bridge, or do we have to go through this thing? We're crossing over a mountain. Is there a tunnel, or are we going around it, or are we going over it, right? And finding a guide who knows that patch of the map, right? Because not everybody knows every part, but finding someone who can help you with that stage, that's where coaching is at its finest. That's where you bring in a consultant for that specific part of your endeavor. That's where you'll get a significant return. There's a group that had this because there's an interesting second part of that. Is like finding the right person when you're starting that leg. Like let's say we're going around this mountain, right? And we've got to traverse that distance. It's difficult to do. You're moving through mountains. It's all of these things. You want to find a guide who can take you to the other side of the mountain. But what we also have to recognize is once we've gotten to the other side of the mountain, there was a client that I had recently who had hired a coach who did that. They got them around the mountain. They helped put in this system inside their organization to make sense of the chaos of rapid growth. They were adding hundreds of clients a year in a business of 12 people, right? And they were doing marketing for them. It was full service, and it was stunning how fast they were growing. And so they realized, hey, we need help making sense of all of this. They did that right the first time. They found the right consultant for the right time who got them around the mountain. But then they kept growing. By getting around the mountain, by doing what the consultant told them to do, they moved into the next stage. And the consultant kept trying to take them around the mountain. because that's what they knew. They realized, hey, I helped you, right? You came in, you were a mess. I helped you get through that. If you would just listen to more of what I said, you'll continue to succeed like you did in the beginning. And what had happened was they had just outgrown that system. They had moved into another stage and they needed a more expandable, more scalable system. And they were caught in the tension of, this person really helped us. They were right, when we were stuck. And now they're telling us to do something, but it doesn't feel right anymore. And they were so torn up about this that then their leadership team was so torn up about it that right before I met them, their top leader inside the organization quit. She walked in one day. She's, I've had enough. It's too much. It's exhausting. I can't do this. And so when I met, there was a couple that was running the organization. When I met them at a meeting, and I was presenting some of the things that we've talked about here today, they came to me afterwards and they're like, if you can't help us, we're done. Like we've given it our best shot. We thought we figured out what to do. We followed this advice, and this is terrible. Right. And that's really hard to say when you're running a multi-million-dollar organization. It's hard to get pity from folks, but I know what it's like. You know what it's like to get trapped in an organization, especially one that you made. That's a really, really discouraging place to be. And when I could help them see the time factor, right? The when factor of what was going on, that they had just moved to the next model, it didn't make that past consultant a bad guy. He did exactly what he was supposed to do for the time. It just meant that they were in another stage. It takes all the judgment out of it, right? There's not good coaches and bad coaches. It's just the right coach for the right time. And once they realized that, they stepped into the next one, then they tripled the next year, right? And it's just about finding the right person for the right time.
And it's, what I heard was, and I'm just going to summarize it again, was they're taking their mountain climbing equipment to the ocean.
Yeah.
And they needed to learn how to sail now because they were past those mountains.
Yeah. It's
So-
exactly what it is. And when we make it clear, it can make it like feel detached, because no one would do that. No one would trounce into the ocean. But what we may do is look at an ocean or a lake or something, and the fastest route is across that ocean. Or we may look to the right and say, hey, there's a mountain range over here. I know how to climb mountains. And so that's what we tend to do, is we tend to look at it and say, hey, I know how to do this. So this is the system that we have. We know how to climb mountains. Let's keep climbing mountains, and hopefully it'll find our way around to the other side. And, it's to have a little fun with it. There's an I Love Lucy episode where Lucy's there, and I believe it's Ricky comes in, and she's looking underneath the couch, and he says, hey, what's wrong? And she said, well, I've lost my, I think it was a ring. And he said, well, did you lose it in the living room? She's like, no, I lost it in the bedroom, but the light is brighter out here. And that's what we tend to do, right? It's just what we're used to, what we can see, where the light is. We go after those things, but that's not necessarily the fastest route. And so again, kind of bring it full circle. That's where that map matters. Because if I can see, hey, the route is here, and then I can say, oh, there's a guide, right, who knows the lake, who can take me across there, and I get the right coach for the right time. You'll move through the mountains well, you'll move across the lake well, and you move on to consecutively greater degrees of success.
This was awesome. I have loved every second of this conversation. There was a ton of juicy stuff in there. And I love that even though we walked in with the business coaching industry is broken, what it really is it's not broken per se. However, we want to tackle all of these things from that holistic approach, that it's not just a one size fits all. We don't need to go looking for our unicorns. that there's plenty, there's plenty out there. And it's just a matter of finding the right map, the right guide, being the right guide as well. So making sure that you are connecting to the right people and supporting the ones that you can support, and coming from that place of service and abundance, knowing that there is plenty for everyone.
Absolutely.
So, Scott, thank you so much for your time. Can you share again one more time with our listeners the best way to be able to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Visit us at scalearchitects.com. You'll find everything that you need there. And again, the free chapter of our book, Predictable Success, is available on the website at scalearchitects.com/free-chapter.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time, Scott. This was brilliant, and I know our listeners got a ton of value out of it.
My pleasure, Velma. Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners for coming and spending your time with us again today. I hope you found a huge amount of value from this. Be sure to like, subscribe, and head on over to Facebook and join us at Heart-repreneurs with Terri Levine. You'll find a lot of juicy information there and a lot of great people to be able to connect and collaborate with. So thank you and have a brilliant day.
You've been listening to Heart-repreneur Radio, maximizing your personal and business results by leading with your heart with your host, Terri Levine. This show is produced every week for your enjoyment and education. To make sure you never miss a single show, add us to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes. You can also read Terri's latest blog posts at www.heartrepreneur.com/blog or follow Terri on Twitter at MentorTerri and on Facebook.com/Heart-repreneur Terri Levine. Your questions and comments are always welcome and appreciated. Send them to Terri on either Facebook or Twitter. Thank you for listening.